Naomi Sparks stepped cautiously onto the polished stone floor of the poolside lounge, water dripping from her oversized thrifted t-shirt and faded shorts. Her tangled hair clung damply to her neck, and her well-worn sandals slapped softly against the marble. She paused, swallowing a nervous breath as the rich scent of polished mahogany mingled with subtle floral notes washed over her. Around her, the infinity pool stretched like a gleaming mirror beneath the afternoon sun, surrounded by sleek leather loungers and gardenias in full bloom. It was undeniably beautiful, an elite oasis that seemed worlds away from her modest life. She tried to steady her pulse as she glanced at the guests scattered around the area. A man in a crisp linen suit on a chaise lounge raised his eyebrow, exchanging a quick, pointed look with a woman balancing a designer handbag. Whispers wafted her way, voices dipping into hushed sneers. The elegant women in silk dresses shot sideways glances, their smiles stiffening with concealed disdain. Naomi felt the weight of their eyes, cold, judgmental, her sodden appearance an insult to the refined scene. A tall waiter in an immaculate uniform caught sight of her almost instantly. His gaze flicked from the frayed hem of her shirt to the water pooling on her sandals, then to the cheap canvas tote hanging limply from her shoulder. His lips pressed into a thin line as suspicion clouded his features. She was an unwelcome anomaly amid the polished crowd. Amid the quiet murmurs, a middle-aged man near the bar scoffed loudly, "Who let the drowning fish in here?" His voice carried, drawing a few sharp laughs. A nearby woman, perched on a high stool, smirked and agreed, "Probably lost or just can't afford the public pool." Naomi kept her head down, heart pounding, determined not to retreat despite the chilly reception. The waiter's polished shoes clicked sharply as he approached Naomi. His gaze hardened as he stopped a foot away, folding his arms. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice dripping with false politeness. "Are you lost? This area is for residents and VIP guests only." Naomi met his eyes steadily, forcing a quiet confidence. "I'm here to enjoy the pool," she said softly, brushing strands of wet hair from her face. Her voice lacked any hint of defensiveness, but her hands trembled slightly at her sides. The waiter glanced at her again, eyes narrowing at her dripping clothes, worn sandals, and the threadbare tote bag that looked like it might collapse under even the smallest weight. "Enjoy the pool," he repeated, a smirk tugging at one side of his mouth. "You're clearly soaked. We don't serve people who look like they just fell in. And this is a private lounge, Mississippi. Maybe you want the public pool. It's down the road." Naomi's cheeks burned as a ripple of laughter passed through a nearby group of guests. She tightened her lips and took a small step forward. "I just asked if I could have a towel and perhaps an unoccupied spot where I can dry off." The waiter's smirk twisted into a sneer. "Towels are for paying guests who follow the dress code." He shook his head slowly. "You don't belong here." At that moment, a man lounging near the pool pulled out his phone, aiming it casually in Naomi's direction. "Got to capture this," he muttered to his companion, a broad grin spreading across his face. "Look at this mess of a guest, completely out of place." The woman beside him chuckled, her eyes flashing with cruelty. "Probably couldn't handle the pool on her own. What's she doing here? This is a place for elegance, not some soggy mess." Others nearby leaned in closer, whispering and exchanging amused glances. "She probably couldn't even afford the entrance fee," someone whispered. Another added, "And now she's making slobbery puddles everywhere." Naomi's hands clenched at her sides. Her breath hitched as the laughter and murmurs wrapped around her like cold chains. She wanted to say something, to explain, but the words stuck deep in her throat. She could feel the heat of humiliation rising, hot and unwelcome. She glanced down at her sodden feet, the water pooling inside her sandals. A sinking feeling rooted her to the spot. The waiter gave an impatient sigh and waved a hand toward the far end of the lounge, where the wooden benches were shaded and plain, far from the plush chaise lounges clustered near the pool. "You can sit over there," he said with a finality that stung like a slap. "But don't expect any service." Naomi hesitated, swallowing hard. The room seemed to tilt, reeling under the weight of silent judgment. She looked up briefly, catching the cold eyes that ignored her, the pointed fingers behind back turned just enough to avoid direct confrontation. No one moved to offer her comfort or a kind word. They just watched, comfortable in their scoffing indifference. Her throat tightened, but she refused to let tears fall. Gathering whatever strength she could muster, Naomi stepped toward the shadowed benches, dragging her feet like they weighed 1,000 pounds. The smeared trail of water on the marble followed her, unmistakable proof of her unwanted presence. Once settled, she wrapped her damp arms around herself, trying to stop her body from shivering in both cold and mortification. Every passing laugh, every whispered insult, echoed louder in her ears than the soft splashes from the pool. She pulled her knees up slightly, wishing to shrink into the shadows, to become invisible. From across the lounge, the waiter's eyes lingered on her, a mixture of triumph and scorn. His chest puffed with self-satisfaction, convinced he had handled the situation properly. He turned away with a dismissive flick of his wrist and disappeared back behind the polished bar. Naomi dared one last scan of the crowd. A woman in a sun hat glanced upward and quickly looked away. A couple murmured to each other, their heads barely moving but their expressions cold and dismissive. Not a single person stood or moved toward her in support. Her skin prickled with a deep loneliness, sharper than the early evening chill. For all the opulence and sparkling light, she was utterly alone, an alien presence unworthy of the place's luxury or respect. Her fingers gripped the edges of the blue towel someone had carelessly tossed beside her. She rubbed it against her wrists, seeking comfort in the simple fabric. It did little to quell the ache settling inside her chest. Naomi's mind raced. Why had she come? Why had she hoped it could be different? She glanced again at the far edge of the pool, the shimmering water reflecting the late afternoon sun in blinding shards. Somewhere beyond that glint, her dignity lay broken, but quietly, she refused to let it shatter completely. Closing her eyes momentarily, Naomi inhaled a steadying breath. Her response might have been small, a soft, forced smile towards a passing child chasing a rubber ball, but it was a sign. A signal she would endure. That agonizing moment stretched on, fragile between humiliation and determination, while the crowd resumed their languid discussions and cocktails. The waiter moved again, this time offering lavish service to a well-dressed couple by the poolside, a stark reminder that Naomi remained invisible and unwelcome. Her soaked shoes nudged at the marble floor nervously. The echoes of mocking laughter faded but never disappeared, lingering like a shadow that clung to her. As the sky softened toward dusk, the mood of the lounge shifted subtly, as if waiting for something else to break the uneasy silence. In the quiet staff lounge, just beyond the sleek elegance of the poolside lounge, the hotel manager, Curtis Langdon, sat alone with a grim expression. The glow of his tablet illuminated his face as he watched the footage of Naomi's confrontation unfold again. His lips tightened at the sight of the young waiter's harsh words and the guests' laughter. Curtis leaned back in his leather chair and muttered under his breath, a dry bitterness surfacing. "Exclusivity isn't just a slogan," he said, voice low but fierce. "It's what keeps this place prestigious. You let in one imposter, and the whole brand, every bit of hard-earned reputation, crumbles." He tapped the screen sharply. "That girl clearly doesn't belong here." Curtis believed deeply in the idea that Sparks Resorts were a symbol of refined wealth, taste, and privilege. Every guest should conform to that image, or be politely, and if necessary, firmly, removed. He told himself the waiter's public dismissal was necessary, even laudable. Protecting the resort's reputation meant that people who were careless or unpolished could not sully the experience for their elite clientele. "Good work, Daniel," Curtis said once the footage ended, addressing the waiter by name. "You handled it perfectly. Didn't give her an inch. That's how we maintain the atmosphere." Back by the pool, the stir of murmured conversations and soft laughter resumed as if the brief disturbance had never cut through the elegant bubble. Glasses clinked, sunscreen-scented patrons reclined on chaise lounges, and quiet music floated above the gentle splash of water. But Naomi sat alone on the weathered wooden bench tucked into the far corner of the lounge. She pulled the towel tighter around her shoulders, her teeth clenched against the cold and embarrassment. She forced herself to smile faintly when a child nearby tossed a brightly colored ball her way, returning it with a gentle toss in reply. She wanted to seem unshaken, composed, anything but broken. Her eyes were damp, but she pressed a hand to her face, wiping quickly to hide any tracks of tears. Quiet anger and hurt simmered beneath her calm surface. The mocking stares still felt raw. The isolation was suffocating. Yet, somewhere beneath the weight of humiliation, a fierce resolve began to stir. As she sat, the dull drone of the lounge's background noise shifted. Footsteps approached, deliberate and confident. Naomi glanced up to see a young hotel assistant navigating smoothly through the lounge. He was dressed in a crisp suit, his name tag gleaming under the amber light. In his hands, he carried a large, thick towel embroidered with the elegant Sparks Resorts logo and a crystal-clear glass filled with chilled sparkling water garnished with a slender lime wedge. "Miss Sparks," the assistant asked politely, voice steady. Naomi's breath caught at the sound of her name. She nodded slowly. "The management requests your presence for a private meeting," he said, offering the towel with a respectful smile. "Please, follow me." Naomi rose, her sodden clothes clinging stubbornly. The movement drew glances again, whispers rippled through the crowd faster than she could track. The atmosphere shifted. Smirks faded into stunned silence, and the closest patrons stopped their conversations, faces turning toward her with puzzled, uncertain expressions. Curtis, standing at the side of the bar, caught the change too. The edge of his mouth tightened as he observed the young assistant guiding Naomi towards a private lounge area. He exchanged a glance with Daniel, the waiter, who looked uneasy for the first time that afternoon. "Someone's here for her?" Daniel muttered, voice low, eyebrows raised. "Didn't the boss say no exceptions?" Curtis shook his head slowly, brow furrowing, a rare flicker of nervousness crossing his usually confident demeanor. "Policies can change," he said quietly. "Wait and see." As Naomi followed the assistant, guests whispered behind their hands, doubtful eyes darting toward her. The man who had filmed her earlier pocketed his phone with a sheepish chuckle, quickly looking away. The woman who called her a drowning fish pressed her lips tight, her gaze fixed on the pool, unwilling to meet Naomi's eyes. Naomi's skin prickled with the weight of all those former judgments, but now tempered by curiosity and growing anticipation. The dull ache in her chest was still there, but alongside it was a thrill. Something more was unfolding, something beyond the cold rejection. They entered a wood-paneled private room overlooking the pool. The assistant gestured toward a plush leather chair. Naomi sat cautiously, her wet garments sending little streams of water onto a thick rug. The assistant closed the door gently behind them. "We apologize for the earlier treatment," he said sincerely, folding his hands. "Miss Sparks has many responsibilities, and despite a desire to remain low-key, you have important business here." Naomi nodded, biting back a small smile. On the other side of the resort, Curtis convened a quick meeting with senior staff. "We were under the wrong impression," he admitted, voice cautious but resolute. Naomi Sparks is more than a guest, she's the owner. Her presence here today is personal. We must adjust immediately. Elsewhere, the poolside patrons began to exchange uneasy glances. Conversations hushed into murmurs. The waitstaff ceased their routine, watching the private room with heightened attention. Naomi stared out the window at the sparkling water beneath the afternoon sun. The laughter and brightness of the lounge seemed distant now. Her hands trembled slightly, no longer from cold, but from the anticipation rippling through her body. She thought of the countless hours poured into building the Sparks Resort chain from the ground up, the sacrifices made to create a place that was supposed to feel like a luxurious escape for everyone. And now, faced with rejection in the same spaces she had labored to create, her anger and resolve swelled quietly within her. The assistant's soft footsteps drew her attention back inside. "They are ready to welcome you, Miss Sparks," he said softly, a hint of warmth lacing his words. "You have an audience." Naomi took a deep breath, smoothing her wet hair away from her face. She rose with quiet dignity, steady despite her soaked clothes and the tremors within. Outside the private room, the crowd's chatter shifted tone again. Guests leaned forward, catching sight of her moving into the main lounge. Her ordinary clothes soaked and clinging, her gaze steady and unyielding, magnified her unexpected presence. Something in the air changed, a hiss of surprise, a nervous shuffle as whispered conversations turned into stunned silence. At that moment, Curtis cleared his throat and stepped forward to address the crowd. The collected guests turned their full attention to the hotel manager, their expressions taut with curiosity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Curtis began, voice smooth but firm. "I believe some introductions are in order." Naomi's name had entered the room not as an accusation or a joke, but as a declaration. Behind the scenes, Daniel the waiter wiped his palms on his trousers, his confidence shaken for the first time. The crowd's eyes were no longer on the elegant amenities or their drinks, but focused squarely on the woman they had mocked a short time ago. Naomi remained poised, radiant in her quiet strength, offering no words as she let the moment speak for itself. Curtis took a deep breath, his voice steady as he spoke into the small microphone by the poolside lounge, drawing every pair of eyes toward him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I would like to introduce Naomi Sparks." A faint rustle spread through the crowd as heads turned toward the damp, plainly dressed woman making her way from the edge of the lounge toward the center. "Miss Sparks is the founder and owner of the Sparks Resort chain." The gasp from the assembled guests was instantaneous, sharp and unmistakable. Phones appeared, cameras lifted, and whispers exploded in a wave of surprise and disbelief. Faces that had once looked at Naomi with disdain now shifted rapidly into confusion, then embarrassment. The couple who had been lounging nearby exchanged wide-eyed glances, both lowering their drinks awkwardly. Naomi's wet clothes clung to her frame, and droplets traced the curves of her arms and legs, yet she walked forward with the quiet grace of someone utterly in control. Her tangled hair, freshly soaked and unstyled, did nothing to diminish the powerful aura she carried. In fact, the contrast between her simple appearance and the grandeur of the moment made her all the more magnetic. Daniel, the waiter who had earlier cast her aside with visible contempt, remained rooted near the bar, frozen in disbelief. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed, incredulous stare. The subtle confidence that had held him steady just moments before wavered, cracks beginning to appear in the facade of assured superiority. Guests who had whispered cruel remarks inches away from Naomi were now lowering their gaze, cheeks flushing red with shame. Some averted their eyes altogether, while others stammered apologies after timidly approaching her. A tall woman with a diamond bracelet reached out hesitantly to touch Naomi's arm. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice thick with guilt. "I didn't know." Naomi allowed a serene, gentle smile to grace her lips. She spoke with warm clarity. "Thank you. I appreciate your kindness." Then, addressing the crowd with a calm, steady tone, she shared a small but revealing part of her story. "I dress simply by choice," she said. "It's a personal vow, comfort and practicality over extravagance. I value authenticity above appearance. Just prior to arriving here, I returned from a long flight and went for a swim to clear my mind. I wanted nothing more than to enjoy the pool and relax, unaware my presence would cause such a stir." Her words resonated across the room. Some guests nodded, their initial judgment replaced by newfound respect. The luxury around them suddenly seemed hollow where once it had felt inviting. Naomi continued, "I founded these resorts with a vision of inclusivity and compassion, where anyone who honors kindness can find refuge. Not exclusion or shallow appearances. We build memories, not barriers." The ease with which she spoke and the sincerity of her message silenced the murmurs. She carried herself like a leader, not with arrogance or power, but with humility and genuine grace. Her soaked exterior now symbolized not weakness, but strength and resilience. By her side, Curtis took a step forward, smoothing his tie as he added, "Miss Sparks has dedicated years to crafting an unparalleled experience, one that is about respect and community. We will be reviewing our staff training to make sure this spirit is reflected in every corner of our resorts." The crowd shifted, a subtle collective breath of relief and renewal flowing through the lounge. The divide between elite patrons and the heart of the resort's mission felt bridged, if only for a moment. Daniel remained silent, the weight of his earlier actions pressing heavily upon him. Naomi caught his glance out of the corner of her eye, a flicker of regret and surprise that softened the coldness between them. But she offered no condemnation. Instead, as the formal announcement concluded, Naomi turned toward her husband, Thomas Sparks, who had quietly slipped into the lounge. His strong, reassuring presence beside her reflected a partnership rooted in mutual support and shared dream. Thomas approached the microphone, voice steady but proud. "Thank you, Naomi. It's time for Sparks Resorts to honor the principles we truly stand for. No one here should feel unseen or unimportant because of appearance or circumstance. We are more than a brand. We are a family." Guests broke into polite applause, warm and genuine. Those who had mocked Naomi only moments before shifted uneasily, their earlier cruelty exposed in the light of truth. Amid the crowd, a few tried to hide their shame with forced smiles, while others sought to make amends, offering small gestures of kindness toward Naomi and the couple. The whispered apologies hung in the air, tinged with humility. Naomi's eyes shone with quiet satisfaction. The moment was not about revenge or gloating, but about reclaiming respect and reminding everyone of a deeper humanity. She allowed herself a small laugh when a young boy tugged at her sleeve, wide-eyed with admiration. "You're the lady who owns this place?" he asked with innocent wonder. "Yes," she replied, kneeling down to meet his gaze. "And I'm so glad you came to visit." The contrast between Naomi's simple, soaked appearance and the shimmer of the illustrious resort created an unforgettable image, a woman who had earned her place not through display, but through perseverance and conviction. As twilight settled, the pool's reflective surface sparkled with the fading sunlight, mirroring the glow of a community beginning to heal and grow. Naomi's story, her presence, had transformed more than just the lounge that day. It shifted the atmosphere, breaking down barriers that had seemed immovable. The guests, still whispering, still watching, found themselves changed, reminded that true luxury lies in the heart, not the trappings. And Naomi, dripping but dignified, stood poised at the center of it all, a quiet force of power and grace. The cheers and applause that followed Naomi's quiet but powerful speech began to fade as Curtis took a step forward, his face a mask of authority and disappointment. "Daniel," he said sharply, his voice carrying clearly across the lounge. "I want you to join me inside the management office." The crowd, still buzzing with surprise and admiration for Naomi, shifted uneasily at the direct rebuke. Daniel's shoulders stiffened, the confident air he had flaunted earlier drained away. He glanced at Naomi, who caught his eye with a serene but unreadable expression. Slowly, he nodded and followed Curtis away from the poolside lounge as whispers trailed after them. Behind closed doors, Curtis faced Daniel with a stern glare. "You embarrassed the very person who owns this chain," he said coldly. "Your attitude and judgment were unacceptable. I'm placing you on administrative leave pending an internal review." Daniel swallowed hard, realizing this was more than a reprimand. I was just following the rules, sir," he protested weakly. Curtis shook his head firmly. "Following rules does not excuse disrespect or cruelty. We value hospitality here, and that means treating everyone with dignity." From the lounge, the murmurs of guests grew louder, many expressing disapproval of Daniel's behavior and support for Naomi. Words like arrogance and unprofessional floated in the air alongside praise for the owner's grace and humility. Across the poolside, Thomas Sparks placed a steady hand on Naomi's shoulder. "You handled that beautifully," he said quietly. "The message you sent will change things here." Naomi smiled gently, exhaustion and relief mingling beneath her composed exterior. "It was never about one person," she replied. "It's about what we stand for as a company." As the crowd began to disperse, several guests approached Naomi with sincere apologies, each encounter softening the atmosphere. Some offered gifts or invitations to future visits, eager to make amends for their earlier coldness. Behind the scenes, news of the incident spread quickly. Clips of Daniel's confrontation with Naomi went viral, shared widely online, sparking debates about class, appearance, and respect in luxury settings. The resort's management moved swiftly to address the fallout. Daniel was enrolled in sensitivity and service training, and a public statement was released reaffirming the resort's commitment to inclusivity and respect for all guests. A week later, Naomi arrived at the resort early one morning, her damp days behind her. She spotted Daniel quietly cleaning tables near the cafe, a far cry from his former confidence strut. Their eyes met briefly. This time, his gaze held something different: humility. As she passed, Naomi offered him a small, enigmatic smile, an unspoken acknowledgement of growth and forgiveness. Daniel nodded in return, a silent promise to do better. At the same time, the resort buzzed with a new spirit. Staff meetings included discussions about empathy and welcoming attitudes. Guests noticed the change, often commenting on the warmth and genuine kindness they encountered. Naomi walked through the garden path leading to the poolside lounge, her steps sure and steady. The sun cast a golden glow over the manicured lawns and glistening fountains, symbols of the resort's refined elegance now matched by the heart beneath. Patrons turned to watch her pass, recognition and respect in their eyes. The memory of the soaked, simple woman who had once been humiliated lingered, but was now replaced by admiration and quiet pride. The atmosphere of the place felt transformed, less about exclusivity and more about connection. At the far end of the pool, where the shadowed benches once marked Naomi's exile, guests now gathered freely, sharing laughter and stories. Naomi paused for a moment, watching the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. Her presence had shifted the tide, breaking down walls of prejudice and reminding everyone that true luxury includes acceptance, humility, and grace. With a final glance over her shoulder, Naomi continued forward, walking not just as the owner of Sparks Resorts, but as a woman whose strength had changed a world, one small moment at a time.